Spring Boot 4 and Spring Framework 7 are right around the corner, and I want to take a look at a lot of the new features coming in this exciting release. So I'm going to create a playlist. You'll be able to find it somewhere here. I'll link to it in the description below. But today I want to talk about API versioning in Spring. Now, if we've built REST APIs in the past, we've probably come across the idea of having to version those APIs. If we add additional features or we make breaking changes, we may need a new version of the API for our clients to consume. Now, this is something you could do previously, but you kind of had to figure it out yourself. You had to have to roll your own solution. And this was fine. But the problem with this is especially if you are in teams or enterprises where you have a whole bunch of applications that you're working on, that means each team can kind of version their APIs according to their own ways, their own standards, right? And a lot of times this leads to inconsistencies across teams. And this is what we're trying to avoid. So Spring Framework is now giving you a way or ways to version your APIs. And that's what we're going to look at today. We're going to build an app from scratch. We're going to talk about how some of the things we need to think about when versioning our APIs, and then take a look at the new mechanism that allows us multiple ways to kind of version our APIs. So I'm going to head over to my website. I have an article on this, so if you want to, you can go over to the blog, or you can just search for API versioning. And this is the article that is basically going to cover a lot of the code. You see the GitHub repo here that we're going to walk through today, and we're going to talk about this. There's also some really good documentation over on spring.io. So if you go to Spring Framework and you look at 7.0, which is what Spring Boot 4 is using, there'll be some documentation on this. So what I want to do is just build out an application. We'll talk through a couple of the things, and then we'll look at the different mechanisms for versioning our APIs. So to do this, I am going to use Spring Boot 4.0. Right now, there's a release candidate 1, so that's what we're going to choose. If you're watching this in the future when 4.0 is out, just go ahead and use at least 4.0 or above. So I'm going to say dev.dan Vega. We'll call this API users. And we're just going to bring in one dependency, which is the web dependency. This is going to give us the bits that we need to get this set up. So with that, I'll go ahead and generate a zip. I'll download that zip file. I'll open it up in my favorite IDE, which is IntelliJ IDEA, but you can open it up in whatever text editor or IDE you're most efficient in. With that, we have everything we need. Let's write some code. All right, so I'm going to start this application off by creating a new class. Actually, we'll create a record out of this. And let's just say that in this record, we had an integer ID, we had a string name, and we had a string email. And then obviously we probably have a lot more fields here, but for this case, we'll just start with these 3. So when I go ahead and create something like a user controller, let's do this now. So user controller. This is a class. This is a REST controller. We might have a request mapping for /API/users. And then maybe I have a way to get these users. So I might have a get mapping for find all. So public list of users, that looks okay, but I'm going to call this find all. And then we just return a list of users. So let's just say null for now. We'll come back to that. So we need to get these users somehow. So I want to go ahead and set up basically a repository of users. In this case, I'm just going to set up one, but I'll create a Java class here. I'll call this user repository. This is a class. We'll mark it with repository. And then we'll start with private final list of user. So we have a list of user, and we'll call this users. And let's just go ahead and initialize this to a new array list. So I might have a public list user find all that just returns users. That's good. Maybe I have a way to find by ID that takes an integer. So we'll just go ahead and stream that. We'll filter that by the user ID. So u.id .equals ID. Sure, that looks good. And then maybe I have a post construct here. If you're not sure what post construct is, it's just going to load after any dependencies. Really, I don't even need to do this here. I could do this in the constructor since we don't really have any dependencies. So, but I'll just go ahead and add one here. So I'll say new user, and we'll give it an ID of 1, a name of Dan Vega, and an email address of danvega@gmail.com. Okay, so now we have our user repository. We can go ahead and use this in here. I can say private final. Yes, we'll get this through constructor injection. And then ultimately, I am going to use the user repositories.findAll method to return our users. Now, the big problem with this is that anytime we create some type of data carrier object, like a user, this is, in this case, it's just in memory, but maybe sometimes we will be mapping this to maybe a database call. And so not really good practice to return this user because we may not want to return all of these fields. We may want to do some other things with it, like hide some sensitive information. So generally, best practice here is we want to set up a DTO, which is a data transfer object. So I might have something like user DTO v1, because this is our version 1. And this can just be a record, right? So integer ID, string name, string email. Right now it's the same, but again, we're kind of setting ourselves up for the future. We're thinking about future us. And hey, if something changes, then I can just map this to, I can create a new DTO for v2 and set up that mapping. So really at the end of the day, I want to return this, not the actual user. So maybe in my user controller here, I can return the DTO, or in my repository. But something else that we end up having to do is using some type of user mapper. So what I might do is create a simple Java class here called user mapper. And this is going to be a component. And again, we could use something like mapstruct here, which is a really good library for doing this kind of thing. But I'm just going to do this in hand. So I might say public user DTO v1 to v1. And what we'll take in is a user. And then what we'll return is a new user DTO version 1. And so we'll take the user ID, the user name, and the user email, and that will return that. All right, so now back in my user controller, I might have a private final user mapper. Yes, we'll add that to constructor injection. And then maybe this class is just handling v1. So we might have something like this. And then instead of just returning the repositories find all method, maybe we do something like find all, and then we go ahead and stream this and we map this to using the user mapper. So user mapper, and then we'll map this to v1. And then we'll collect this back into a list, and we'll say collectors dot to, where's my to list? I know it's in here somewhere. So collectors, if I spelled it right, that would probably help, right? Dot to list. There we are. Okay. So now, we're going to make sure that we return v1. And now we've kind of set ourselves up for the future, right? If we want to, we can go ahead and create a user DTO v2, and maybe we create a different user controller class that has all of our v2 methods in it. That's one way, one approach that I've seen done in the past. But again, this can get a little messy, and we're kind of handling this really only from one place, which is the path. We are saying that we're going to create a v1. So then when we need to create a new API, we're going to create a new route for v2, and then all of our v2 APIs are going to be there. And this is great if we have a whole bunch of destructive changes, but what if we just had something small and we just wanted to add like a new field to the user object. That doesn't really require like a brand new path, right? We could just simply add something to user, like a new field, and that isn't a breaking change. That's really just an additional change to it, right? So what we're going to do is take a look at how we can version this here in Spring using the new API versioning. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is set up some configuration. Now, I can do this using Java config. I can do this in application.properties. I'm going to show you both just so you have this available to you. And again, Dan, we are spelling things wrong today. Not a fun time. Let's go ahead and start with a web config. So we're going to create a new Java class called the web config. And this is going to be a configuration class. And what we are going to do is we are going to implement the web MVC configurer. To do that, we'll go ahead and override a method here. We are looking for configure API versioning. So there we have that. So now what we can do is we can use that configurer and we can set some configuration here. So the first thing I want to do is add supported versions. Like, what are the versions of this API that are going to be supported? So we follow a semantic versioning approach here. So things like 1.0.0 are supported. You can do 1.0.1, or you can even just say 1 if you wanted to. If you just say 1, this is kind of implicit, so it doesn't really matter either way. So I might just say 1.0.0 here. And I might say that 1.1.0 is another one. And finally, 2.0.0 is another version that we support. So those are supported versions. If we don't want to have to go around and kind of update things and kind of set versions everywhere, we can set a default version. So I might say set default version equal to 1.0.0, and that's our version. Now we have to figure out, like, how are we going to version these APIs? There's a couple different ways that we can do this. So we can do this through what's known as the path segment, right? So this is like V1 users, right? Similar to the way that we did it before. We can use something like a request header. We can use something like a query param, and also we can use a media type parameter. So those are different ways that we can do that. Again, can't spell today, Dan. So these are some different ways. Now we're going to take a look at path segment first. And normally, like these other three, you can kind of mix and match them, but path segment is always going to override everything. So again, I think of this as like a breaking change, going from version 1 to version 2, whereas like a request header, I might be able to send in like version 1.1 or something like that. So just know that you can mix these three, but once you start introducing path segment, you can't have a path segment and a request header. Path segment's always going to override that. So what I'm going to do here is I want to say that I want to support the path segment. So I will say use path segment, path segment, and then where is the index of that? So in my case, it's going to be 1 because I'm going to do /users/version/whatever, right? So if it was right away, if it was like /v1, then I can do that there. So I'm going to use this as the index, and that'll give us kind of a good starting ground. So now when I come in here, what I want to do is actually, so that's 0, that would be 1. So let's just go ahead and remove that. And so now what we'll do is we'll say a version here, right? And then we'll go ahead and say users. So that will be the version. Then what we need to do is we need to tell it the version. So in this case, we're going to say version equals 1.0.0. So now we haven't really done anything because we've actually set a default version. So if we were to remove this, this would still get called. Okay, so now we have everything in place. We should be able to get this to work. So let's go ahead and run this application. And if we send a GET request to /API /1.0.0, or one in this case, /users, this should be what is called. So let's go ahead and give this a shot. So I'm on the terminal here. I'm just going to make a call to 8080 /API /1.0.0 /users. And we see that this is called, and we get our version 1 of the API. All right, so let's say that in this case, we're going to go ahead and make some breaking changes. So what I want to do is introduce a version 2.0, and this is going to return a new user DTO. So again, back in the user, I have ID, name, and email. But let's say that I wanted to split up the name into first name and last name. If I was going about this the way that I started and just had this user record, then I really have no way to change that, right? That's why we introduced that DTO. So that DTO version 1 can still contain the name. And now what I'll do from a DTO version 2 standpoint is I will have the first name and the last name. So let's call this user DTO v2. I'll call this a record. I'll say integer ID, string first name, string last name, and string email, right? So now I have a v2. So I can come down here and I can say v2, and then I'll just need to update my mapper so that I have a way to map to v2. So let's say that I have my mapper, and in here, I will have a function to kind of split the name out. Let's just do this. And now I have a way to split the name out. So now I create a new user DTO v2. I have the ID, and I have the first name and the last name. And now I have something that I can return here. So what do we... okay, so we want to change this to that. And then find all users v2, right? Okay, so now we have two different versions of this. So now if we call in and we ask for version 1, this is the method that's going to get called. If we call in and ask for version 2, this is the method that's going to be called. Okay, so let's go ahead and try this. So let's say 8080 /API 1.0.0 users. So that still works. So now what we'll do is go ahead and change this to 2.0.0 users. And now we see that we are calling that specific endpoint that splits the name up into the first name and the last name. Okay, so far so good. Now again, we've done this in the web config. If you look at the blog post that I have or in the final source code, you can do this right in application.properties too. I'm just showing you both ways that you can do it. Now, one thing that I noticed when I was messing around with this is like, okay, this works, but I don't know that I love passing 2.0.0. Maybe I might want to have my own custom way of representing a specific version. So in my case, maybe I want it to say v2. So what we provide is an API version parser so that you can go ahead and customize this if you like. So let's go ahead and say, I have my API version parser. Sure. And this is going to implement Spring Framework's API versioning partner. Yes. And then we'll go ahead and implement the method, which is parse version. So I'm just going to copy some code in here that I have from the repo. And if you look at it this way, all we're going to do is remove the version, the V from the prefix. So if it starts with it, remove it. And if add.0, if it's just a single number, because 1 now becomes 1.0, you can have it become .2, .0.0 if you want, but 1.0 and 1.0.0 are essentially the same thing. So with this version parser in place, if we go back to our config and we say version parser, we want to make sure that this one is there, which it is, right? And I can just say new API versioning parser. Now I could set that up as a component and inject that into this class. I'm just being quick here with it. So now I have this version parser. So if I go back up here and I go ahead and make this change. Let's go back to our terminal. Oops, clear. And now what I want to do is make a request to 8080/API/v2 users. And we are getting a 400. Why? I think because I've specified that. Yeah, okay. That's strange. So I'll have to look at that. I wonder why that is, because semantically those two are correct. But again, if I change my version parser to just add that extra 0, that would work as well. So it's probably because we are rewriting that, but this is essentially the same. So now I can take this in and say, give me the V1 version. And yeah, I didn't restart this, but that would work just fine. So now we have some ways to use the path as a way to version our API. But what if there is another scenario? What if we don't want to rewrite the entire path? Maybe we just want to have some additional changes that don't require a brand new version. Maybe we are moving to 1.1 of the API and not everything's break, or 1.0.1, not everything's breaking. And we want to just go ahead and add that ability. So I'll head over to here, and maybe I have something like string website and make that there. And now in version 1, it's just something I can add to this string website. And if we go ahead and go back to our user controller, I can go ahead and set up a get mapping. Let's call this value. Actually, so let's do this. So maybe I just had API/users and the version was 1.1, right? For this, I'll do, and maybe we do a user repository.findAll.stream .map.collect. So now in this user 1.1, how can we go ahead and do this? So in this case, I go ahead and say user.website. And now if we want to get this one called, so how do we call this specific version of the endpoint? So we need to, if we don't pass a version, then the version by default is going to be 1.0. So this is actually going to get called. Let's just verify that. So actually, let's go back over to our config. And so we're no longer going to use the path segment. I'm going to use the request header. And then I want to be able to set what is the request header being used. So in this case, I'll say X, which is custom API version. And that's the header that we're going to use to toggle between versions, right? So let's go ahead and restart this. Again, let's look at our, let's just add this. All right, and let's go ahead and restart this. And then if I go over here and I don't request anything, so if I just say API/users, and I do that, then users not found. That is because, let's do this. Okay, so again, looking for those specific versions. So as I come into here, and we still are getting a 400, 1.0. Dan. All right, no biggie. Having some fun here, learning some things together. Okay, back to our terminal. And there we go. API users not found. That's good. That's better. So API/users not found, because we have defaulted to 1.0 and we don't have a mapping for 1.0. So if we want to, we could easily create one for 1.0, but I'll just show you how you can go ahead and say which version this is. So I'm going to say X API version is equal to 1.1. And now you see that this particular mapping is called. So we have a bunch of different ways that we can do this. Again, in the configuration, if I didn't want to use, say, a request header, I can come in and I can use a query param. So there's an example of that in the repo. I can use a media type parameter if I want. And again, with these other ones, with these three right here, I can go ahead and mix and match them. I can add both a request header and a query param. But in the case of the path segment, this is going to kind of overwrite everything. So you can't really mix and match those. And again, I've done this in a Java config. You can easily come into application.properties and API version. So we can see that, hey, what are the versions that are supported? What is the default? Do you want to use a header? Do you want to use a query parameter? Do you want to use a path segment? Whether the API version is required with each request. Detect supported, the use media type. There's a bunch of different properties that you can set in here as well. All right, that's it. One of the new features coming in Spring Boot 4 and Spring Framework 7 is the ability to version your APIs, giving you always a whole bunch of different ways to configure this, using things like the path segment, the request parameter, the query parameter, or the request header, the query parameter, the media type. Being able to set which versions are actually supported, what the default version is. There's a whole bunch of things you can do to version your APIs here, which is really great. So I hope you found this useful. If you did and you have some questions, go ahead and take a look at the repo and the blog post that will be in the description below. But if you have questions, go ahead and leave them in the comments. With that, I hope you learned something new today. Stay tuned for this series. I should have a playlist here with a bunch of new videos on these new features in Spring Framework 7 and Spring Boot 4. And I hope you enjoy them. What are your favorite features coming up? What are you looking forward to most? I know this is one of those features for me, but a bunch of exciting things planned for this release, and I hope to cover a lot of them here on this channel. If you learned something new today, friends, you know what to do. Leave me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and as always, happy coding.